The Shepnaz Podcast begins now.
Welcome to the Shepnaz Podcast. I'm Joe, and I'm your host today. And as you might already know, it is...
Bring it in, Joe.
Worship Wednesday.
Yes.
it is.
It's our favorite button. It's our favorite button.
Oh, we have a new friend with us that is wondering what in the world she just signed up for now. She's like, I heard it was a church podcast. Yeah. And so many of those you might listen to are just like a repeat of a sermon.
Yep.
And although we do discuss sermons on here,
yes,
we don't normally just replay them and
Correct.
call it a podcast. That is not a criticism to other people that do, because it's very effective for some people that do. But we're a little different around here. So
Just a little bit, huh?
So, Zach, bring us in and tell us who we have with us and why in the world is she here?
Absolutely. So, welcome to Worship Wednesday. Mm-hmm. As you all know, we talk all things worship on Worship Wednesday, hence the name.
Oh, that could be our new tagline. All things worship.
All things worship. It's beautiful. And maybe a few extras, right? I don't know.
And we could get little like bobbleheads that you put on the dash while you're listening to the podcast.
I would pay big money for a Noah bobblehead for my car.
Yeah,
I would.
That would be nice.
With the bun. With the bun. It has to have the bun.
Right,
Yeah.
and it's flopping, you know, whenever you hit the brakes.
It's perfect. It's perfect. Well, on this episode of Worship Wednesday, we're coming up with $1 million ideas.
Yeah.
But more importantly, we have my good friend Cierra. Welcome, Cierra. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello.
And as you guys have heard a few podcasts ago, we talked about some of the things that we do extra, like outside of our normal rehearsals on Tuesday nights or our Sunday stuff, just things that help us to sharpen our roles, right? Like how to get better at what we do. And so Cierra here runs something called AriseWithCierra. And Cierra is a phenomenal vocal coach, like legit phenomenal. And I'm not just saying that to blow smoke, like she's legit. And I've actually wanted to bring Cierra in to work with our team for a long time. And we had a cool opportunity. Cierra reached out for her to come in and do a training for us. And so a few Sundays back, we did two Sundays worth of trainings, vocal trainings. Yeah. And so we wanted to invite Cierra in to come and just kind of explain to us a little bit more about what she does and why she does it. So Cierra, welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome to the Shepnaz Podcast.
This is so fancy. This is so cool. I'm like, ooh,
It's a very
what celebrities
fancy,
feel like? Wow.
Very fancy closet.
It's just a dolled up closet.
It's okay. No, I love it. This is so cool. Thanks for having me.
Anytime. Yeah. Thanks for being here. Well, we kind of just wanted to bring you in because I really appreciate what you do. And I had watched it from afar. And so I won't steal all your talking time. But so do you want to kind of explain, one, how we know each other and kind of where our friendship journey began? Let's start there. I won't ask you a million questions at once.
Okay. So we met because the church I grew up in, you and Kristen joined the staff there. Mm-hmm. And so then we were on a worship team together. And at that time, I was doing a different service. I was doing first service, and you guys were in more of the contemporary. And then I ended up joining. So like over time, we just kind of, our worlds kind of collided. Yeah. And that's kind of how I met y'all. And then I don't even know how long were you guys, how long did we do worship together? Was that like a year or 2 years?
At least, yeah.
Okay.
Right around then.
Yeah. And then transition happened, and then it's just funny because it's like been a lot of years, like 6 years or something since, and then now we're here and we're doing worship stuff together, and that's really cool.
Our worlds recollided.
I know. It's so cool.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
Actually, it was funny. I was waiting to bring this up for this conversation, but I was Facebook creeping and just looking back on old stuff, and I found the video where we did the carol off.
Oh my gosh. No, in the street.
Yeah, in the street. It was so hokey. It's so fun. It was out of control. Long story short.
Sounds like something I should cut to.
It's blackmail. It's blackmail. Don't
I'll send you a link.
All right.
But
it was fun. I mean, I thought it was like, and when you're young and like I still had just started doing worship stuff since college. I was freshly out of college. And so, video shoots and stuff like that was cool. I was like, oh, this is so fun. Like, Right. We were in the middle of the street just singing Christmas carols.
Yep.
It was wild. Wild time.
I felt very cringy when I was watching it when Chris and I had our banter. I'll send you a link. It's bad.
I've seen
bad in a great way.
I'm pretty sure I've seen you out in a cornfield singing with a band also.
Yeah, I've done that a time
About
or two.
that time, same time period.
Yeah, we thought
it's wild.
There's some weird things we did, but
you were having a whole Mumford and Son moment at that time.
Thriving.
That's exactly what it was. Just trying to be the Costco Mumford and Son. That's what it was.
We should go out to a cornfield, take some cool pictures.
Yeah. That's what we did.
Yep.
It was sweet. Awesome. Well, then, so Cierra, tell us about, because you are a worship leader and you are also a vocal coach. And I think the thing I want to highlight the most from our training that I appreciated, and one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you in, is because you're not just a phenomenal vocal coach and teaching the technique and how to get better technically, but you're also very intentional about the spiritual side of what we do. And that was something in our training that every little piece of it pointed back to the heart behind what we do. So can you kind of tell us a little bit about your worship leading journey and what led you to feel called to do what you do now?
Yeah, so I think, oh my goodness, it's wild because I, never wanted to work for a church. I never thought worship leading was in the cards. Like when I went to college, my initial goal was to perform on cruise ships, which is just, wild because I'm like, okay, I want to travel the world and just perform. And I don't really need a degree, but let me, at least get a degree just in case. And I was not sure of where the Lord wanted me, but I knew that I wanted to do music and I wanted to travel. And so essentially my prayer to the Lord was just like, Lord, I want to travel, I want to do music, and I want to change the world, whatever, whether that's like just my world, my little world, or whatever platform that looks like. And, that's its own thing. And so it's funny because I joined the worship team in college. I was in the worship team at my home church, but I was in just the choir. And so when I went off to college, I joined the worship team and I started to learn what it meant to live a life of worship and I moved 12 hours away to get away from Ohio, and I told God I was never coming back, but that's a joke in and of itself. I've been back for almost a decade. It's fine. But I think worship was just something I loved to do, but I think I was scared of. I think I felt disqualified. I think I felt like there were other people who could do it better because I was fresh and I was new. I mean, I was 18, 19, and I was dealing with nerves on stage, and I was pitchy, and I didn't know how to navigate the mental side. And so I think the Lord started really cultivating my heart for worship in college, but I didn't see it. And what's funny is I told the Lord I was never coming back, and he shut every door when I graduated, every single door, even like worship internships where they were like, pretty much like, you're the perfect candidate for this. For some reason, it was like, we shut the door. And it's funny to me because I was running from worship leading because it was more comfortable to run from worship leading, and yet it kept finding me. and it's funny because my college pastor, I went back to Mississippi like years ago, and I was like, it's so wild that I'm a worship leader. I never would have thought. And he was like, I knew. And I was like, could you have just made my journey a lot easier and just cleared this up if you had some word from God or something, So essentially, long story short, is that I really didn't find worship leading. I feel like it just kept appearing, and God just kept giving opportunities or giving me a a chance to step in obedience, even though it was terrifying.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but God, like teaching is safer, and like being in my own little bubble is safer. Like this feels safer. And, but it's just funny because I've always had a passion for teaching and for the nerd side of voice stuff and just figuring out why it works. I love that. And so it's just interesting because I never, if you would have asked me 10 years ago, I never would have thought that I'd be developing worship leaders. I thought that I would be doing worship and teaching voice. And it's just so wild how the Lord was so intentional about like, yes, I'm developing as a worship leader, but it's because I'm merging your heart for the voice and cultivating the gift well, and then really combining that and intertwining that with the soul work that has to happen. But in that, he had to do a lot of soul work in me. Yeah. And so, and I told the Lord after a lot of really hurtful things within the church and the worship world, I was like, yeah, God, I'm not it. Like, I'm not even going to work for a church. If this is what it is, I don't want it. Yeah. And that had to happen for me to learn a lot as well. And so it's just wild how it happens, because I told God I was never coming back and he brought me back. I told God I wasn't going to be a worship leader and he created an opportunity for me to be a worship leader. And I told God I wasn't going to work for a church. And then 2020 happened and I was using a church to teach voice lessons. I was renting out a space and they needed a worship leader, and I was trying to run. I was like, abort. And essentially the Lord it had to be a divine something, because I was okay with stepping in and I felt okay. That there had been so much healing and restoration from the hurt and pain. And he wanted to also use that to restore even more. And then he wanted to use it as a testimony and a further development that I could use as a tool to develop my team further. So, and when they hired me, they wanted someone who could teach the tangible and meet the spiritual. And so a lot of times in worship leading, we have people who have the heart for worship, but they don't have the tangible skill set. Or there's people who are like great musicians that, have done all these great things, and then we lose the heart of worship. And so it's like we're constantly finding that balance, but that's in the spiritual life too. Yeah. So anyways, sorry, that was long-winded, but it's been a long journey to get here. I mean, it's been wild. And God's just like, just kidding, here you go. And so I think this is like really my thing. I teach contemporary music, but I thought I would just be contemporary and just be worship. And it's wild. The past like 5 years, the Lord has just been like providing worship leaders from other churches. And I'm like, wow, I feel like this is what it's about. Like, you're not just developing a performer, you're not developing just the gift, but you're also developing a soul. And you're pouring into the kingdom in a way that's more than just a voice. And I think there's just something so beautiful. And I'm like, I'm so unworthy to do this. You know what I mean? But I'm just so thankful because I love it. It's the coolest job ever. So not saying y'all's jobs aren't cool, but I think like for me, at least, the Lord is like, that is just, it combines everything. I get to travel, I get to teach, I get to change the world. And that was my prayer. I didn't care what it looked like. I didn't want to come back to Ohio, so I guess I did care a little bit, but even in that, there was so much protection that I see now. There was so much provision that I see now, that my life would look so different if I would have stayed in Mississippi. And so I think, God's just good and he's sovereign, and it's hard to see it in the moments and in the pain, but it's been a really cool journey. I'm almost 10 years into my business, and I'm just like, wow. Like, that's not what I expected it to be, but I'm okay with it because that's really cool. And so that's kind of my heart. I would love to like travel the whole world and and pour into worship teams, because it's just, there's something so beautiful about doing God work. Yeah,
absolutely. That's awesome. Well, and one thing that you said in there that really resonated with me is like, we have an idea of what we want, right? Like, so we've talked about this a little bit, and a little bit too, but so like, I always just wanted to play music. Like, that was my life goal ever since I was a kid. So then, when I used to do the crazy party, rock and roll life, and then had my conversion moment, and I joined a Christian band, and that was the first time I got to tour all over the country. And I thought this, I've done it. I've made it. This is what God has called me to do. And I felt like this was it. And I remember, I won't tell the whole story because I've told it before and it would be a long story, but I remember the pivotal moment that we were at a camp doing worship for a camp and had an interaction with a young person. And I remember the voice of the Holy Spirit that was like, no, Zach, what you thought you were doing was just prepping you for what I actually have for you to do.
Right.
So it's cool to see the way that God works like that.
Right.
So just following that obedience. And now, like you said, I love what I do. Being here at Shepherd and getting to work with these guys and to lead this church is amazing. And the other thing, I'll let you speak into this too a little bit because you've experienced this. But the other thing that you said is, you're not just working on voices, but you're working on souls too.
Right.
That's huge. And it's a piece that not a lot of people, I don't think, realize in the worship world is they just think you're just there to make a cool band sound good and to lead people in worship. Right. But that doesn't include the behind the scenes prayers and the conversations and we're shepherding people too.
Right.
We're not just working on their technical skills, but we're working on helping them grow closer to Jesus.
Right.
I wanted to speak to a moment for that because I think especially in the worship community, you will have a collection of people that have had hurts in their past. I mean, that's not uncommon for any group of people that you would talk about, but specifically in the worship group, you have a lot of that because maybe I played guitar when I was, whatever years old, and I got brave enough at one point that I volunteered and I got rejected. Yep. And so, or somebody that, as you mentioned, when you were just beginning to sing, you didn't have a confidence because you felt like you were pitchy and you needed to learn some technique things or whatever. And so you really put yourself out there when you're putting your talents and your abilities on trial. Am I good enough? And then sometimes people say no. And so then I would imagine, and maybe you could speak to this, you might walk into environments where you're trying to train some people and in the trying to strike that balance of I'm trying to make you better, but I don't want you to feel bad about where you are. How do you heal some of those hurts maybe that they've had in the past?
Yeah, I think it just takes time, but also because of my understanding that for my own self and being able to share my own story, I think that gives people a safe space. But also, the studio, I am just a huge advocate for giving people space to be where they are today, and we constantly say progress over perfection. And they know that I'm not ever gonna lie. I'm not gonna say something sounds good if it doesn't, and that I'm there. And I think the hard part, one, confidence is the first thing that we see grow in the studio because you have someone essentially mentoring you and guiding you, which is great because then if you're not just aimlessly striving, hoping it sounds better or hoping it feels better. I think just in general, having some sort of structure and guidance naturally will give us more confidence. I mean, even in a job, if they tell you what's expected of you and they show you how to do it, you're going to feel more confident a little bit quicker than if they're like, good luck to you. And so I think for me, I speak a lot of life. I speak a lot of encouragement and I leave a lot of space for the journey. I think that's really important because, everyone's on a journey. And also I do use the Enneagram a lot. I know it's some people like it, some people don't, but I use it just to understand how people process things. And if I understand how they process things, I know what words or what phrases or what things are going to kind of play into that. So if they believe that a sound is bad and they're in their mind, nothing can be bad or else they are bad, then I'm like, hey, I want this to sound bad. So I'm giving them permission to do something that's not what they would go for. And then they're able to build the confidence to know they can do it. And so I use that a lot, but also it's just like being aware of people, like reading their behaviors and hearing what they're saying. I think it's just being very intentional with what are you saying and what do you need? And being really patient. And then providing tangible tools that are not overwhelming, that just give them the next step instead of trying to reveal the whole journey.
That's good.
And encouraging them to just take one step today, and they don't have to jump back into the worship team tomorrow. Like, it's okay if we work our steps until we feel ready, and then we can have a conversation about, are we ready for this? And so I think it's just being willing to see people and meet them wherever they're out on the journey, whatever that looks like. And so I try to just encourage and leave space for that. I don't know if that really answers your question.
Yeah, it does. And I guess also to kind of piggyback off of that, maybe if you could speak to a little bit, because I'm sure there's a lot of people listening that have like no idea this position even kind of existed, that people do this kind of thing, and like that's your job. And they might have these visions of where you have this classroom of like Christian calisthenics teaching people how to raise their hands and how to wave at the appropriate times and things like that. So do we get jumpers and that's what we do? Or what does that look like?
Well, it just, honestly...
Do we get jumpers?
You like how I just said that complete serious deadpan.
I mean, I want to always take things back to the Bible. Like, I want to keep it, like, I don't want to get so logistical that I start to create a confines of what I think a worship team should look like. Because I think worship in heaven looks diverse. I think that, and we know that God sees the heart. And so whether my hands are lifted, whether I'm jumping, whether I'm standing still, like, who am I to decide, what God is doing? Because, you and him are having this encounter, and it's okay for it to look different. And so I think like it's tough to, which I talk a lot with the worship team about what their church is about and where they're at. And there's just certain topics that maybe if we don't agree on it, I won't teach on it. And that's okay. But in general, like, I feel like I give a loose confines that provides enough structure that people can feel confident that they don't look weird or, whatever, the tangible things that can help them without telling them what it has to look like. Mm-hmm. And so I think that that's something that I really try to do well, so that it's not Cierra, like making little Cierras all around the world, because your worship doesn't need to look like mine.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And if you all start looking like me, well, then I become the savior. I become the idol. I become the pedestal. And the whole point is, how can I help you usher your gift well so that you aren't focused all on it the whole service because you're distracted by how you can't hit the note, or you can't do this, or you don't know if you look weird, or, all the logistics that distract us from the presence of God. The whole point of cultivating it is so that people can be more available for what the Lord's doing. So then I can't be the judge of what that also has to look like, right? And so I think it's tricky, and there's just not people doing it. So like the whole idea of like, people actually do this. It's like, not really, like, not really. And like, I could probably count on my finger, like on one hand, less than that, like, of who is actually developing worship leaders, like the whole person, not just the voice. There's thousands and thousands of vocal coaches, and there's thousands and thousands of worship leaders, and there's thousands and thousands of leadership conferences, and you can go and experience worship, but there's not vocal conferences for worship leaders. Yeah. And I told Zach, and I always say this as a joke, but it's like true, is if I don't have a voice, I can't be a worship leader. But we put so much emphasis on the spiritual side, which is very important, But if we don't cultivate the gift well, then we don't have the gift to even be able to lead, to do the job that we were hired for. And so, and if our body's a temple and our voice is part of our body and we're going to be singing in heaven for eternity, I mean, like, if there's this call to sing throughout the Bible and I don't usher my gift well, then am I really ushering the responsibility of this job that the Lord has honored and blessed me with? Yeah. And the responsibility is heavy. And I think also the way that Zach was talking about is like developing souls. I mean, there's even more of a weight. I feel like it'd be easier just to teach voice, There's an extra weight. There's an extra responsibility to know that I'm not just cultivating a voice, but a soul. Like, oof. And that can be, heavy, but it's so beautiful. And so, I don't know if that answers your question either, but
Oh, you're doing fine.
Okay.
Definitely did.
There's so many pieces and parts. It's hard to because they intertwine. So it's like, well, kind of, but not really, Yeah. So
100%.
It is hard to find though. Yeah. It is hard to find. And churches just naturally don't have it in a budget to develop the gift. And it's not because they're being rude or anything. It's most of the time the people who are developing the budget are not singers. Yep. And that's okay. Or it's from an outside perspective, I'd be like, you can already sing. Why would we need something in the budget to take voice lessons? Why would we need it in the budget to develop our team vocally? Like, don't they just do that at home? Or like, don't they just, And so it's not their fault. It's just we're finding that churches don't have a budget for development of the cultivation of the gift. And there's more of a budget for leadership conferences and things like that. And so I would love to see conferences that have both. I would love to see the spiritual side, like breakouts with the spiritual heart of worship development, but also the tangible, like how does the voice work and how do I do this thing well so that they can meet each other. And so that's really my heart. I mean, I'm not going to do the conference. I'm not going to put it together. But I mean, it would be amazing.
But I'll show up.
I'll show up and I will be like, this is what I need.
Also, we're going to move back to Ohio. So
oh man, I shouldn't say I'm not. The Lord's going to laugh.
That's
and he's
normally
going to be
what
like,
happens.
jokes. Yeah. I'm just kidding, Lord. I didn't say I'm not. I said I maybe probably won't. I don't know.
So how did you learn the more skillful part and the more intricate part of singing? Is that something you went to school for, or is that something you YouTubed and kind of made because that's how I've learned everything is YouTube
University, baby.
I'd love to know.
That's so funny. So I got my music degree in Mississippi. I'm actually in my master's degree for vocal pedagogy right now.
Nice.
And it's a research heavy degree. I am starting my research on riffing this fall. How riffing happens. It's super nerdy and I'm loving it. But so in English, continuing education and constantly being teachable is the thing. So I started with my degree and then I try to go to a training every year. So then right out of college, I started with Estel voice training, which is essentially they teach you how to isolate all the different muscles that you use in singing, but you isolate one at a time to create different colors and sounds. And so it's super nerdy and, you could just... it's so fun. And so I started with that, and you can get certifications with them, but I attended that training for level 1 and 2 a couple times. I've done different courses. I try to do a course every year just to keep up on research. And then now that I'm in a research heavy degree through a university in the UK, they have a bunch, like every week they have new courses with the top vocal pedagogues in the world. And they're teaching on different things, the mental side of singing. They're teaching on, how singing affects you when you're pregnant or, like things like that. Like they're the things you never would even think of, but then you're going to encounter in the studio. So staying up to date on research is huge because honestly, YouTube and Instagram, it is really hard to know whose information is right. And so the exercise can sound really cool, but if I'm not doing it right, is it really good for me? And is it the exercise I need? And I've done so many warm-ups wrong.
Yeah.
And before I was a teacher, like I just would be like, oh, I mean, it sounded kind of like how she sounded, but it didn't feel good. But there's no one there saying, hey, check for this, check for this. And so I think we're actually doing our singers a disservice because we're trying to be vocal, like famous vocal teachers, but we're only giving snippets and we're not guiding the full story. And if I don't know what vocal checkpoints, then I'm kind of being irresponsible with my platform. And it's hard to know. And it's not because they're trying to be evil. They're trying to like give you little snippets, but they fully understand the backstory and they understand why we're doing it and what it's used for. Whereas someone on YouTube is just like, this sounds like a cool exercise. It said it'll help me hit my high pitches, so let's do it. Yeah. And there's just a lot of misinformation, especially if there's a lot of voice teachers that don't do the trainings, but then teach what they know. Because research is always changing. Yeah. So there's just certain things that people are still saying that are extremely harmful. And that's why it's, that's why it's really important to be with a coach that one can give you tangible feedback, but also someone that is constantly learning, because you don't want someone who has 10-year-old research. You just don't. Yeah. And so part of cultivating the gift well is making sure that you're with a teacher that's also passionate about knowing and staying up to date, and so that they can help you cultivate it well, right? Because we don't want to misguide people. And I've been injured with a coach who misguided me. And so I've also had that as part of my story. And so I think that's also why I get a little irked when I see certain things. And I'm like, you have 30,000 followers or 200,000 followers. And that tip is extremely harmful. Yeah. And what do I do about it? Like, I can't change it. I just have to make sure that my page is...
You're one of those angry commenters.
Yeah, no, I just can't.
Look what you're doing.
No, yeah. And I and then I'm like, oh, gotta be Jesus still, because I'm cultivating worship leaders. So it's just, then it's like, okay, well, I can't control that. I just have to try to do my part on my page with my couple followers. It's great. But that's fine.
Before we wrap up, there may be people that are listening, maybe even people at other churches or even people here that would want to get a hold of you. Like, I think, guessing maybe you've got a website or something like that. Could you talk to us about that for a little bit?
Yeah, so I have a website, and it's www.AriseWithCierra.com. I don't think I've ever spoken out my website before. Hello. AriseWithCierra, CIERRA. And I'm also, a lot of our content goes on Instagram. It's kind of like my main hub. And so it's just at AriseWithCierra on Facebook, on Instagram. And there's tips and tricks on there. There's an opportunity for people who might want to try out the studio that they can come in for a free 30-minute lesson and just try it out. We have a membership option. We have a pop-in option. But, I really am loving the season of working with worship leaders and worship teams, being able to pour into more people. So the private stuff is obviously love, and it's where I really thrive. But, I'm also loving the workshops. So I would love to get in with more churches and just be able to pour in. And so it's a beautiful season. I'm just here for it.
I can say firsthand, highly recommend it. Highly recommend it.
Endorsed by Zach.
For real, though. It was a game changer.
Endorsed.
It's been a game changer. I've already been seeing some improvements in things I'm doing because of what you taught us and our team is using already. So highly recommend. You should hit her up.
Yeah.
Do it, churches.
All right. Sounds great. Well, if you've been listening today and you're like, I'm not even a singer, so what in the world? It is important, just as we were talking about the progress of people's voices and their talents, that every day that you're taking just another step closer to Jesus. And we pray that that is the case for you as well. We encourage you to follow everything that's going on at the church by going to Shepnaz.org. Also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. For all of us from here at Worship Wednesday, have a great day. This podcast is a production of the Shepherd Church of the Nazarene, Gahanna, Ohio. Email to podcast@shepnaz.org and let us know what you think.